3. Here.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Something is about to break.
Hi everyone, welcome to About to Break. I'm your host Taylor Hughes, and this is the show where we talk to artists and entertainers about the ups and downs of life in the entertainment business. I am so overjoyed today to have our special guest with us, Mr. Simon Majumdar.
Hello.
Oh my goodness!
People are very rarely overjoyed when I come in anywhere, so I'm very grateful.
The last time we were together, there was a room of 150 people overjoyed because you were serving them this amazing meal.
That's right. That's where we met, when you were hosting an event, and you were terrific. And I remember you stepped up and did a trick. I didn't know much about you at this point, and you did a rather fun trick. And everyone sighed because it was one of those kind of tricks that you do to kind of get everyone on you. And it was great fun. And then we hung out. And those, I love doing those events where I get to go and cook dinners for people and, talk about my story and about the history of food while I'm cooking and just generally have some fun. I don't get to do as much of it as I'd like these days just because I'm so busy running around doing other things.
Right.
But when I get to do them, it's really fun.
Well, I was taken back hearing your story. I mean, I've listened to your podcast, Eat My Globe, and I love hearing the history of food, told through you. But I've never heard you, on TV tell your story before. And I thought, we got to sit down and talk on the show about this because your journey into what you're doing now is such a unique path.
That's a nice way of putting it. A grand accident. I kind of
those are the best kind.
Haplessly wandering through life and seem to keep standing up and keep being able to feed myself, but I'm not quite sure how long it's going to last.
Well, most people, you see someone on TV, and I used to make the mistake of seeing people on TV and going, well, everyone on TV is, extremely wealthy, has no problems, is doing what they love, and has always been that way.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case.
No, not at all. In fact, funnily enough, when I was a child, I believed that everyone who was on TV was actually dead. Did you know that? That was when I was about 5. That's what I assumed that it was like a ghostly world and that everyone who was on TV was dead. And
that's funny.
It's true. And then one of my favorite, I think it was like one of the pop stars from the 60s, Freddie and the Dreamers, which probably shows how old I am, appeared on TV, and I cried for a while, and my parents had to explain to me that wasn't the case, that my belief was in the fact that it was a ghostly world wasn't true. So anyway, not that that's got anything to do with what you were talking about.
When you're a kid, you have no concept, though, of television. I remember I watched Gidget. Did you ever see the show Gidget with Sally Field? Okay, so Sally Field played, and this was, the show was on maybe in the 60s, early 60s, but she was a young, surfer girl. And then when I was a kid, they were playing reruns. Now, I didn't know what a rerun was. I just thought if it was on TV, it was happening right then.
Yes.
And I fell in love with Sally Field as Gidget. And then years later, I realized my childhood crush was already grown up and doing bone health commercials.
The choice of TV and reruns.
Right.
Hey, we've got to thank reruns. It keeps your face in front of people.
I told you when we met that I would immediately get street cred by meeting you because I have 2 young daughters, Madeline and Kennedy, who are obsessed, not just with Food Network, but they're obsessed with cooking. And every time we watch one of the shows, like Cutthroat Kitchen, you're their favorite judge.
Oh, well, that's very kind.
Yeah, when I went home you had sent them that nice video, and so we go home and as soon as I get in the door, they're watching Cutthroat Kitchen, and my youngest goes, "Turn it to the next one. Simon's not on this one."
Oh, those are my kind of people. Yeah. Well raised, good parenting. That's what I reckon. It makes a big difference. Good parenting.
Yeah, I know we should probably limit the amount of TV they watch, but every time they do, they go make Brussels sprouts. So I'm like, go for it. Just keep cooking as long as you keep doing something active.
The Food Network, I think, has, had an amazing impact, particularly on young folk who love watching the shows, and they go and cook and they'll hold Chopped parties or Cutthroat Kitchen parties or whatever kind of party, or they'll try and replicate some of the dishes that they see Bobby Flay cook or on Iron Chef or whatever's going on. I think it's raising a great new generation of cooks.
I think so. My daughters, on more than one occasion, have given us little boxes, like shoe boxes, and said, fill these up like Chopped baskets. and then we'll have to do something with it.
I love that. I absolutely love it, because apart from anything else, just getting their imaginations going, getting them learning how ingredients work together. And one of the things about Chopped is you'll see some ingredients that are very kind of, you think they're very weird,
right?
But when you look at them in their essential qualities, even if you had gummy bears, you go, well, okay, they're very sweet. What can I do with that? So I'm going to put gummy bears with some vinegar and make a sweet and sour sauce and use it with this. So once kids get used to what the essentials are of some of these crazy ingredients and what's at their fundamental, then they'll understand and they can start cooking. And basically, like anything, it's all about discipline. Once you understand in cooking that certain things are sour, certain things are salty, certain things are hot, certain things are sweet,
right? And
you understand that it's all about balancing those things together, you can go off in all kinds of directions. I always say it's like learning to play piano before you go and try and play jazz.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I think about it. And things like Chopped are a great way of teaching children how to do that.
Yeah, that's so good. I was not patient like that when I was a kid, to learn the process. I remember I got a skateboard for Christmas and immediately wanted to jump down a set of steps. And my dad let me do it. And he's like, you'll do it once and then you'll realize maybe you should learn to ride the thing first.
Well, I think we all have that kind of impatience, and we've all had that where we've injured ourselves a little bit and done something. Not in the kitchen. I always kind of try and say, let's try and keep it safe in there. There's lots of knives and hot flames and all of that stuff going on.
Right.
But I think this new generation, for all the kind of criticism we're giving millennials now, and I'm an older guy, and we're giving these young kids, I actually am rather taken with what's going on. I think they're getting involved, they're getting active, in all kinds of things. I don't just mean politically or they're traveling. I think they're really intellectually curious, and it's very easy, as older people do, to kind of criticize a younger generation. But I'm actually more positive and more optimistic than many people.
Yeah, I think that, the minute you start talking with the people that we criticize and you get to know them and you realize, well, they have a different journey and different perspective, and it's important for us to not just make assumptions of entire generations of people.
Absolutely. And the other thing, going back to food, is if you watch, as I have been lucky enough to do some of these junior competitions, MasterChef Junior.
Yeah.
But these kids are amazing. I was like, I have no idea how you're doing that. And yet they're like, they have to stand on a box to reach the stove, and they're cooking stuff that I couldn't even dream of. So, I'm confident for all the craziness that we've got going on now. I'm really confident in the long-term future of things, because I just think it'll right itself into one way or another till, and we'll still have battles ahead, but I think I'm more confident than a lot of people.
Was that something that was instilled in you as a child? I mean, was your family very adventurous when it came to trying new things, or is that something you've discovered in your travels?
I think it's a bit of both. It was, and, I very recently lost my father, and my mother died about 15 years ago, so, here I am, having lost two of those great roots. But they were a mixed race marriage. My father was Indian, my mother was Welsh, which in the 50s in England was pretty unusual. In fact, often, they had a lot of prejudice against them. So they used to have a lot of trouble finding apartments. My father was a doctor. The National Health Service in Britain was very institutionalized, and coming in as an Indian doctor was often a little harder, so they had to travel around. So I think, they learned to move around and kind of make good where they were. Which is why we ended up in a little town in the north called Rotherham, where he managed to settle, become quite a senior surgeon for that region, that county, and end up doing quite well. But I think he had to accept that he was never going to do that in London or somewhere else just because of the circumstances. So I think they took that view that you go where you can to succeed, and you do things a little differently. So I think that was certainly put through to us. And I think the opportunities that they gave me, my mother was a nurse, my father was a surgeon. They both came to me and said, and to all our family, and said, we don't want you to necessarily go and be a doctor. We want you to be whatever you want to be. Just be any good. And I still remember my father saying to me about anything, he said, be any good. He said, because, people don't respect you, or shouldn't not respect you for what you do, but they should give you no respect if you don't try and do it as well as you can.
Wow,
don't be lazy. Don't be.
Nobody gets a free pass.
Nobody gets a free pass. But and he said whatever that is, and he said, you want to streak the streets, just do it as well as you can. Whatever's going to give you kind of joy in life, and support you, and deal with your responsibilities in life, then that's worth it. So I always had that. So I had a very kind of unusual kind of not upbringing in that sense. I had a very loving upbringing. I often see people talking about, the troubles they had as children and weren't lucky enough to have two loving parents. I had two exceptional parents who cared, to the day they both died about me and my siblings and supported me. So I'm forever grateful for that. And I know a lot of people. I lived in a very, my father was a doctor. I lived in a very comfortable house.
Yeah.
We used to go on holidays around, some of the first foreign holidays that people had, going to Spain and these things in the 60s. So I going to India to visit relatives. So I lived a very blessed life in that sense, and I got to experience lots of things. But they never forced me to do anything. So, I developed, my father was Hindu, my mother was Welsh Baptist, I think, but I developed a kind of a Christian faith when I was quite young, ended up training as an Anglican priest, or going down to do theology at university at least, and then it was made fairly clear to me that I was never going to get through and go to theological college because I don't think I was quite right for it. They probably knew it pretty early on. So I ended up going off and getting another job. I got a job in a bookstore in London, ended up then going into publishing for Penguin Books and working my way through publishing for years, and ended up being quite successful in publishing, helping to run a publishing company in London that did quite well. And, I lived a very indulgent lifestyle in London. I had, I still own a big apartment in London that I bought when I was doing well. My brother and I co-own it, and he still lives there. And I was never, I was eating great meals. I was, writing, I wrote one of the first food blogs. I was living
you were living the life.
I was very much living the life. But what happens, and I think it happens to a lot of people who we look at and think they're living the life, that there's a fundamental emptiness to it. And I felt it, but you can kind of cover all that up with, drinking too many martinis or eating too many great meals or getting on a plane and turning left rather than right.
Right.
And once you do enough of that, you can cover up some of that emptiness. But when it gets to the point where you can't cover it up anymore, it can be quite a kind of damaging time for you, quite a dark time. And I hit that after my mother died. The business I was running started to fail. For lots of reasons, and one of the reasons is I did some stupid things, and that's quite humbling as well. When you think you're living the life and you're great at what you do,
bulletproof. I can't fail.
Absolutely,
everything I do turns to gold.
And then you suddenly realize that actually I'm as dumb as anybody, and I did some things that hurt the business and then potentially hurt other people because the business was going to fail.
Right.
And I had a breakdown. I had a full-on breakdown, and I told the story when I was standing on the stage when we first met. One day I was standing on the balcony of my apartment, and I was going to jump off. I mean, I was literally 1 foot over this balcony, and I still remember the kind of dark humor of things that go through your head. It's the building I'm in London is right next to a very famous cemetery, and Bunhill Fields, and in this cemetery are buried the Wesley brothers who founded Methodism. John Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress, William Blake, and Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson's Crusoe. So it's a very famous cemetery, and I believe that one of Jack the Ripper's victims was found in and around there, if not in the cemetery itself. So this is a very historical place. But I remember looking down at this cemetery as I was about to jump from 4 or 5 stories high and thinking, well, it's a cemetery, so that at least there's no middleman, which is one of those kind of dark jokes that goes through your head.
You get in that moment too, though. I mean,
and I was there, literally 1 foot clambering. And what happened was the people in the apartment below, and I believe they were a Lebanese family. I never met them. I never had a chance to say thank you for them literally saving my life. They opened up the big French doors, glass doors we had on our apartment and the one below. And the smell of their food, they'd opened it up because they were cooking, the smell of their food wafted up. And it's, we're talking Lebanese food, which smells so wonderful, roasting meats and fish and just incredible stuff. So I started smelling this food. And I still remember the thought going through my head where I went, I'm actually more hungry than suicidal right now, so I'm going to go and cook. So I thought, well, I'm going to go and cook something, then I can at least kill myself on a full stomach.
Give yourself your last meal or something.
And I went to cook a dish that my grandmother had taught me about. Which was an Indian soup, red lentil dal. Dal uses lentils, and it's quite, particularly in Bengali culture, this one is quite a soupy one, and it has spices, and it's really nourishing. I call it like chicken soup the Bengali version of chicken soup.
Yeah.
And I started to make this dish. And in fact, in our family, and it truly became that, we used to call it LSD, life-saving dal, because it was like our chicken soup. So it actually became that. And while I was stirring the lentils, dry toasting them in the pan, I found a notebook. And in this notebook, someone had given me one of those Anthony Robbins courses. Anthony Robbins, a very tall guy who runs around and whoops a lot. Yeah. And I would say, I'm British, we don't whoop. Right. We're but strictly a whoop-free zone. But anyway, I started, I'd read this and I'd been to some events, and the only thing I really got out of it was I learned how to set goals, which is something that I do every day, very kind of strictly. Not what have I got to do today, not a to-do list, but about some things more fundamental. What am I trying to achieve today? Okay. What am I, coming to do an event like this or do a podcast, and making sure that I give myself in the right way.
That's great.
So those kind of things. Anyway, I'd done that list, and I'd listed a whole load of things on there that I wanted to do before I turned 40 at this point. And I'd done most of them. I'd had a suit made on Savile Row. I had my teeth fixed. I had I always joke about it. You heard me tell this joke a lot because it's one of my few jokes. But I would say I had very British teeth. They looked like an abandoned cemetery. But I had those fixed. I ran a marathon, which was hard work. And then at the bottom of this list, while I was stirring the lentils, I just saw 4 words. And I don't even remember when I wrote them down, but they just said, go everywhere, eat everything.
Wow. And
I went, wow. I mean, it was literally like someone had slapped me. And I sat down, finished cooking, and I sat down with a glass of white wine and this dal. And it was still dark, and I just had the kitchen light on, so I was kind of in the semi-darkness while I was eating. And I thought, what does that mean? Go everywhere, eat everything. And I started thinking about the places that I'd want. If I was on my deathbed, the places I'd want to go and see, did I walk on the Great Wall of China or visit South Africa or go to the Barrier Reef or all of these things. Yeah. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I slept. I ended up in, as you can tell by me sitting here, I ended up not jumping off the balcony, but I couldn't sleep that night. And I was scribbling things down and thinking about it. And the next day I spoke to the woman who owned the company that I helped run. I just said, I'm off. And she was very supportive. She knew, good people who and they're still people I like. They said, okay. And 3 weeks later, I was on Bondi Beach on a journey that took me around the world and ended up being my first book. So that was kind of the beginning of that side of my career. And I was very fortunate that I knew vaguely and not well, but Anthony Bourdain. I'd met him a couple of times and had a night in a pub with him, which I think a lot of people could say, but he'd been very kind. And I'd emailed him when I said I'm going off around the world to eat. Now, I was not expecting to write a book. I just thought I was going to go around the world to have that break, come back and maybe get another job in publishing.
This was not my plan is I'm going to go do this, write a best-selling book.
Oh, no.
Become known as a food critic. Like
none of that.
Because I mean, obviously you cook it at home, but like you weren't a part of that world at the time, right? I mean,
I was writing. I had one of the first food blogs that was doing quite well. But not. It wasn't. It was a hobby. Right. But what's that saying? I always think of, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Right, yeah.
Which I'm a great believer in, because all the things that I think I'm going to do never happen, but other wonderful things do happen. Yeah. And so I went off around the world, and Anthony Bourdain said, well, you should write a book. And he actually gave me a quote to put on the front of my proposal. Well, I mean, I put it on my Instagram. He didn't need to do that. I was nothing to Anthony Bourdain.
And at this time, he had already written Kitchen Confidential,
and he had a TV show. He wasn't as huge as he became, but he was still incredibly well known. Right. And he basically said, if you put this on the front of the proposal,
they're going to give you a book.
Well, not that they're going to give you a book, but at least they're going to read the proposal. Right. He said, and then and then I won't use the language that he used, but he said, then your proposal had better be good. And he interjected a few very Bourdain-like words in between that. So I kind of went off, had an agent, but not an agent that I knew. I was very determined that I wouldn't go to someone who I knew who'd just be polite and say, okay, well, we'll try. Right. I wanted it to be any good. And then I ended up going up, at this point of the journey, I think it was about 2 or 3 months in, I was halfway up the Yangtze River in China, found the one place that had a kind of dial-up internet. Went in there, they kind of dusted it off for me, and I checked my emails that took about an hour to get. And one of them, and the one came from my agent going, we've sold your book in the UK and America for, a significant amount of money. You're now an author. I was like,
oh, what?
Okay. So it really was. So that happened with the book, and that's also called Eat My Globe, which is why I use that title for my podcast as well, even though they're unrelated kind of in subject, because the podcast is a food history one. And so how that moved on, and I'm just talking here, so you could stop me, but I'm just telling you my tale.
This is amazing.
So what happened was I ended up meeting my now wife on that journey. She was in Brazil. I was in Brazil.
Yeah.
In Salvador da Bahia. You've met my wife. I fell for her very quickly, which is
she's amazing.
She's an amazing person. I mean, certainly the best thing that's ever happened in my life by far. And I came over to meet her in the US after I'd finished writing the book, and the book was published, and I ended up doing a little book tour in the US around it with my publishers. And someone heard me on the radio talking about it, my now manager in Los Angeles, still my manager, John. Thank you, John. And said, oh, we'd love to talk to you. We don't represent anyone in the food business. We represent lots of actors and script writers, but we'd love to be in this business. I heard you talk. Are you ever in LA? Well, it turned out that my wife, Sybil, lived in LA, and that was where we were going to finish. So again, serendipity. I met with him, and he said, okay, well, people don't know you. We'll send you to a few general meetings. We'll get people to know you. And at this point, I was just coming to visit Sybil. I'd proposed. I was still living in the UK. We were moving over here. And then, Sybil and I got married. I became an American resident, so all of that happened. But then he goes to, just before our marriage, he just said, you need to, we're going to have a general meeting with these guys, and they do a show called Iron Chef. Well, I'd never heard of it. Because it's in the UK.
I love that this is how the stories go. The stories never go, I'm going to make a 5-year plan, and I'm going to do this and this. It's always, I was at this bus stop, and I met so-and-so, and you know what I mean? Like, it's being open. That's why I love your attitude of, I'm going to go everywhere, I'm going to eat everything. I'm just going to be open to these opportunities, because it's this kind of stuff that leads.
Well, I don't think you even do it in the right way. I don't think you, let me put this properly.
Yeah.
I don't believe in networking.
Yeah.
I just think
talk about that.
People who go out and say, I want to go to this party to network. Oh, it's me, it's grim. It's a very dark way of looking at interaction. To me, I always think about my life, and I'm 55, so I have less ahead of me than I have behind me. But to me, it's about good people spending time with other good people doing good things.
Right.
Now, if something comes out of that, like we've got to know you and your lovely family, and we spend time with them, and then you say, come and do this podcast, and someone hears this podcast and goes, oh, I heard you on that. Have you ever thought about coming to talk about this here?
Right.
Then that's wonderful.
But that's not the intention behind the relationship. It's
the intention, I think, has got to be,
Yeah.
I think the intention has got to be a lot more generous than that.
Yeah.
And that's what I try and do. So going back to the story, I met with the guys from Iron Chef, and they were telling me about it, and so I went to look it up. And again, we have our own shows in the UK, so I vaguely heard the name Iron Chef, but I didn't really know how big it was here.
It was massive.
So I had a meeting, and they're still very good friends, the people who produce it, and I did a show for them last week.
Yeah,
they're great people, and I had this meeting with them, and I thought it was for the Iron Chef show, where they have 3 judges, and each episode they'll usually have a celebrity and a couple of food people.
Yep.
It turned out that they were also looking for a judge for the show called The Next Iron Chef, which is a big show where you choose the new Iron Chef.
Totally.
And I kind of didn't realize I was in part of that, but I suddenly got a call going, they want you to do this show, The Next Iron Chef.
Yeah.
So that suddenly changed. So there I find myself suddenly, on a beach with Alton Brown, Michael Simon, Donatella, the chairman, doing this show. And I going, okay, well, I'd never done TV before, apart from a few little bits and pieces in the UK.
Right.
So suddenly I find myself there. And I was like, again, I think the attitude was, I'm going to do this as well as I possibly can. I've never done TV before. Luckily, I turned out to be okay at it, I think, because they've invited me back a few times.
Yeah.
But then if I just end up doing this series, what a great experience.
Yeah.
And I'll go off and I'll do something else. And I always have that, maybe it's what they call imposter syndrome. I always have that feeling that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and
say, like,
get back in the bookshop.
Yeah. I think we all do, but I think that's such a healthier perspective, because it keeps you present in the moment and you appreciate the moment for what it is. And it might not be anything beyond this, So let's just enjoy this. So many people, you talk to them and you go, how was that experience? And they go, oh, I was so stressed about, I was going to lose the job or I was going to do, and they never really enjoyed it while it was happening.
Well, I think you get into a field, and entertainment, and we're both in that field in very different ways, but that luckily connect. But you get into that where you think you've got to keep hustling, and I know people in this business who are hustlers, and some of them are very nice people who have to hustle because they've got families and all of this, and they're constantly looking for the next gig and all of this, and then some are just not good people because that's life. There's some people who, much as we'd like to think we're all made in kind of God's image, there's some people who just aren't going to be good people, and they'll undercut you and try and do all kinds of things, or tell people to sack you off a job, and they want to come in, or they'll do it for...
They're looking past you to see who else might be more important behind you.
The over-the-shoulder stare, which to me is, anyway. But I think if you deal with everyone in the right way, and again, this I learned from my father very much. He said, you turn up, you do your job as well as you possibly can, you are polite to everybody, because that's how you should be, not because it's going to do, and that is literally to the person, as I'm lucky enough now to have, for certain gigs, someone will pick me up in a car and drive me to the studio and drive me back, or the wonderful people who do wardrobe or makeup, or the crew, there'll be an assistant who goes, hey, Simon, can I get you a cup of tea? All of these people are working really, really hard to create fantastic shows. And they do say about a great show or anything, it takes a village. And when you do something like Iron Chef or Cutthroat Kitchen, or I've been doing Guys Grocery Games, or all of these shows, it really does take a village to do it. And everyone there is important. So you treat everyone with the respect that they deserve, and you're polite, and you... Pardon my language, but my father was his way of saying it, just don't be a dick.
Right.
So that is one of my kind of biggest rules. And people might think I'm not that when they see me on TV being rude to chefs, but it's my biggest rule with everyone.
I had a very wise friend tell me the same thing. He said there's two types of people in this business. The ones going on the way up and the ones going on the way down, and you don't want to be a dick going up, and you don't want to be a dick going down.
Absolutely. And to me, it's so true. And anyway, I did Iron Chef, and I think
were you right away like I enjoy doing TV, or was it nerve wracking at all? It's a very different experience from watching it to actually being on set.
Television has never been nerve wracking for me. I feel very comfortable doing it, and by that I don't mean to sound immodest. I just really love doing it. Yeah, I love being with the people. I love hanging out with. Not because they're famous, because I don't care. I've had a life before this. I've done other what I call proper jobs, but I get to hang. I get to hang out with, Alton Brown and Guy Fieri and Bobby Flay, and they're amazing people. But some of them have become Jeffrey Zakarian. They've become very good friends. But also, I'm great friends with lots of the crew and lots of the people I stay with, and I get emails. Even got some today from people who are traveling, and they're younger people on the cruise, and they're going, my boyfriend and I are going for our first trip to X. Can you give us any suggestions? That to me is wonderful. So I feel very blessed and very fortunate to be on those sets. But I found that it was a big surprise to me was that I kept on getting us back. They're like, oh, come on back.
You're like, that was a cool one-time experience, and then they called back.
Yeah, and then, they were going, oh, we like what you did on this, come and do this one. So, I don't know how many shows, it's probably a couple of hundred shows now I've done over 10 years, and I go, well, I guess I do this now. Right. But I think the other side of that is yes, that's a joy, and being on TV, and it's fun, and, it can be hard work if you're having to do quite long hours and stuff. I mean, we're not being shot at. I'm not down a coal mine, which some of my, on my Welsh grandparents' side, they used to do. Right. So we're certainly, I never compare it with anything like that. But yeah, some of the days can be hard, and you're tough, and you're traveling a lot. Yeah. But what I really love about it is that the opportunities you then get to do other things as well, because people might see you have a profile. So because of that, I do how we met. I do speaking and cooking demos. Yeah. I go and do travel events, and I'm off to Europe to host a food cruise coming up in a week or so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is amazing.
That's great.
And it's so excited. Or, I get to do the podcast, which people listen to because they might know me from doing Iron Chef or whatever. Right. And they think I might have a viewpoint on the history of tea or the history of gin or whatever the Eat Mo Globe podcast is covering that week. And then other areas where I can, again, I don't want this to sound like I'm being immodest, but I get to do good things for good people in non-profits.
Right.
Because I know that if I turn up and they'll auction off a dinner with me,
right,
they can make a few quid.
Right.
And so for me, that's a real joy as well. So there's all those different elements that come out of having a career on television.
Yeah.
And the other side is the writing, which is if I'm at heart, I'm still a writer. And I write, whether it's a podcast or I'm now the restaurant critic for Time Out LA.
Right.
And writing more features because people are coming to me to go, oh, would you write about your travels to here or wherever you and your wife happen to go? So that's great as well. So I've been able to build up around a lot of good fortune, quite a kind of multifaceted career with speaking and writing and cooking and all kinds of things.
Right.
So I feel really lucky, but I think the reality is that none of this lasts forever.
Yeah.
You enjoy it for what it is, but you don't get so wound up if you don't get a gig that somebody else gets.
Oh, that's so important.
And you, I'm sure, have this when you see someone gets booked as a host for an event or doing, the wonderful magic that I've seen you do. Or if I see someone, I turn on a TV and there's a cooking show and there's 3 other judges on there, it's very easy to go, well, I could do that.
Right.
What are these? Who are these? Yeah. These people. But what you do is you go, well, that's great. I'm glad, particularly as some of them are friends and they have families and I'm like, good for them. Yeah. That took me a while because once you come into the entertainment industry, it's easy to kind of start thinking your people treat you as something special.
Right. Well, and there is this attitude of like, because everyone's hustling to do their thing, it becomes a bit of a competition. When in reality, I've always said, like, for me, a bad magician is my competition. A good magician working and doing a great job is good for all of us.
Absolutely.
Because if he does a great job, they might hire a magician again, and maybe they'll want someone new, and that's great. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the About to Break podcast. 3 quick ways that you can help us out here at About to Break. The first one is to go on iTunes and leave us a review. If you enjoy the program, please leave us a 5-star review. Big thank you to everyone who's already done that. If you haven't yet, please jump over to iTunes. You'll need your iTunes account information. But you can click on the podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Just leave us a 1 or 2 sentence little blurb there. Let people know what you like about it. That helps us out huge. Second way you can help us at About to Break is by becoming a producer. Our goal is to have 1,000 people giving at least $1 a month to help offset the cost of producing these shows. And it does take time. And it is a passion project. I will continue putting these out for free because I think it's a helpful conversation. But anything you can do to help us out by producing the show would be awesome. Go over to abouttobreakpodcast.com, click on Become a Producer, and see what that's all about. Last thing that you can do, and this one is also a real simple way of making a difference, is just sharing the podcast. All right, when you see it out there on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, go ahead and follow along and then share it with your friends. Let someone else know how much you liked it because it sure does make a difference. All right, back to the program. That attitude of not only not being upset when someone else gets an opportunity, but being excited that look what we're all doing. We're keeping food at the forefront of entertainment. We're getting people to talk about the thing that we're passionate about. That's a win for all of us.
I totally agree. And I do think that kind of all boats rise thing is kind of it's very important. And it takes discipline to believe those kind of things. No, because we're all worried about our own profile. Yep. And what I've found, and this again goes back to what my father said, he said, as many people will, and he said this to me fairly recently, not long before he passed, he said, you'll get as much work by turning up, doing a good job, as good as you can, and being a decent person, as you will by being the best at something, but being, and I won't say the word, but not being a good person.
Right.
And I think that's the truth. Of course, like
certainly.
anyone, you practice and you want to do, if someone hires you to do something, you owe it to them to do it as well as you can. But at the same time, I like to think, and my wife will disagree with me that I am this, but I like to think I'm fairly easy maintenance.
Oh yeah.
I don't want lots of things. I mean, like if I'm doing a show on Food Network, the only thing I ask ever is that I can have access to a cup of tea, and sometimes I'll even bring my own tea bags. Yeah. I'm like, I'm English.
I just need some hot water.
If I can't get a cup of tea, I'm not going to be responsible for the way I'm going to behave, and that's all I say. Give me my cup of English breakfast tea, because love this country, and I'm an American citizen. I've been an American citizen for nearly 5 years, and you guys can put people on the moon and all of this stuff, and good Lord, can I never find a good cup of tea in this country? I have no idea what's going on. But slowly, anyway, I mule my own tea bags over from the UK, thousands of bags of them, because I drink a lot of tea. I probably
is it Taylor's? Is that your go-to?
It's actually Taylor's Yorkshire Gold.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful stuff. Taylor's of Harrogate.
We have been importing it. It's since you told us about it. My wife is so obsessed. Every morning she has tea and biscuits for breakfast. She used to have cereal every day, and she was an avid cereal person. She's completely replaced that. Tea and biscuits every day.
British biscuits as well, I believe.
That she brings in.
Hobnobs.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we get the package from the, what is it, the British Post or whatever, and Royal Post or whatever it is. And the other day I said, hey, when was the last time you had a meal? And she's like, I had oatmeal today. I was like, you had oatmeal? She's like, there are oats in the biscuits. I mean,
British biscuits are very different. I mean, Americans listening to this will obviously think of Southern biscuits or even the American cookie, which is too soft and pliable. What you need is a good hard. I mean, the name means twice cooked. Right. It actually comes from the French and then the Royal Navy. They were twice cooked, so they were hard tack. And so they could be used, and in fact, they were originally square on the Royal Navy, and that's where you get one of those with food on top of it, and that's where the 3 square meals a day comes from.
Is that where it comes from?
That's where it comes from the square biscuit on which your food was served.
And they're like somewhat crispy and rigid, but then the thing is, if you dip it in the tea,
you've got to dunk. You got to dunk a biscuit.
Dunk it for and you can't go more than 2.5, 3 seconds.
Well, it depends on the biscuit.
Okay.
So some biscuits are no good and kind of just not dunkable. But other biscuits that were designed for dunking, like the digestive biscuit, which is to try and explain to people, that's almost like a graham cracker.
It's like a graham cracker. Sometimes they have a bit of chocolate on it.
A chocolate digestive is lovely.
British chocolate is different. It's always milk chocolate, right?
Not always milk chocolate, but you can have dark chocolate. But I do like milk chocolate on my biscuit, and you dunk that in your tea, so half of it melts and half it doesn't. It's a very British thing, but it's a glorious it's a glorious thing. So anyway, we went off on a tangent there, but it's a wonderful
thing. The fetchy Mrs. Hughes will be grateful for this part of the conversation. She's like, if you didn't talk about biscuits.
I think, so my needs, I'm very fortunate. I get to eat in great restaurants. I got to eat in an amazing restaurant last night, which I won't name on air because I'm going to review it. And it's going to get,
we'll talk about it after this.
It's going to get a pretty good review, but I'm very fortunate. I get to eat at these amazing restaurants, or I'll do the shows. And if I'm sitting there and I have Morimoto or Alton Brown or whatever, or Bobby Flay or people cooking for me, I get to do that. I'm very fortunate. But at the same time, my actual needs at home, give me a cup of tea and a biscuit at home, and I'm good as gold. Because again, I was brought up in the north of England where people had to really work in the steels and mine. I come from a mine steel town, Sheffield. People really had to work hard for their money, and and we know that people out there still have to do this all the time,
right?
And so, if you don't do what we do in this entertainment business and realize how blessed you are, and we had it the other day when you were kind enough to invite us to the Magic Castle. That's a truly remarkable experience. And I said to Sybil afterwards, very few people get to experience that, particularly with someone who is a member there and gets to see the magic acts. And I said, if we don't realize how lucky we are and take a moment on we're in the Zoom, what do you call it, Uber or whatever, Lyft going home. I said, if we don't take a moment just to think about how lucky we've been for the last 3 hours or whatever time we spent together, then we kind of don't deserve to do it. And that's what I think is really, really important. Whatever you do, whenever you get something that's amazing that happens to you, just take a few moments and think about it. Yeah. And I don't think and we can all be so busy that we don't, and that we don't take time to do it. And this doesn't even mean if you're religious,
right?
Pardon me, but if you get something that's really amazing that happens, just sit back and go, wow. And kind of, I always have a saying, people say, smell the flowers.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a cook, so I always think the greatest smell is roast chicken. So just smell the roast chicken. Just sit back and I'll have it when I'm cooking and everything's bubbling away and the smells, hopefully are pretty good. And I just stand there and I might have a glass of wine and I just think for 2 or 3 minutes about how lucky I am.
Yeah.
That we get to do this, because there are people not only around the world who obviously don't have those opportunities, but people in the United States who, are wanting for food or security or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I just think we need to be a bit more kind of open about and a bit more respectful of the good fortune that we have.
Yeah,
and the
just
blessings that we
live
have.
with gratitude and to realize that. I mean, it's funny too. It's one of these things, especially in entertainment, where you seem to be always wanting the next thing. And never really present in the thing that's happening right now. And I regularly will have conversations with my 8-year-old self. And that's, for me, that's how I ground myself, is I go, all right, 8-year-old Taylor, I want to talk to you. You remember when this was going on and you couldn't ever dream that this might even be possible? Well, today you did this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way of thinking. I have 2 other kind of disciplines or rules that I have that are very important to me. One is, I don't, unless I've got a to-do that I have to send someone a note about an event coming up, or I have a to-do list that my wife helps me, or puts together for me, I should say, every day, and tells me what I've got to do and things coming forward. But I don't think too far ahead, because if I'm here doing this podcast with you, I need to be present now. And if I'm thinking about the fact that in an hour and a half's time, I've got a phone call, which obviously I'll prepare for, but I'm not going to do this properly if that's going through my head. So I try and be very, very present in everything that I do, and I don't look too far ahead, because, my diary's full up to the end of the year, and if I did that, I'd probably get too stressed, but I also wouldn't do anything in a very present way. The second one is, I think gratitude is great, and I think we can say to ourselves, I'm grateful. I think expressing gratitude is even more important. So one of the biggest things that I learned, and I'll tell you, I'm a great believer in mentors and learning this from people. I did a lot of a show on Food Network I've done called Beat Bobby Flay. So which is a great show. After every episode of that I've done, or say I do 2 or 3 together and then I fly home, a few weeks later after the show is finished, I would get a handwritten note from Bobby, from the desk of Bobby Flay, and it's a handwritten note, and it's not just thanks for coming on the show. It's like, hey Simon, I thanks for coming on the show. I know blah blah. Hey, I hear you're going here. Let me know if you have any recommendations. I really loved what you said about X to X. So it's very personal.
Very personal, yeah.
And from a person who is immensely busy. I mean, there can't be many people in the food business who are more busy than Bobby Flay.
Right.
And I remember the first time I got that, it was many years ago, and when the show first started. And I said to my wife, that is extraordinarily powerful. Yeah. The fact that, even to me, someone like Bobby Flay, who is someone I admire and respect, who's at the top of that food entertainment chain, for want of a better word of calling it, I said that he can sit down, and he's not just doing that to me, he's doing it to everyone who appeared on the show. I said, that's remarkable. And I said, not only is that remarkable of him to take the time, but the power that had on me, that someone like that would respond. Right. So now I always take a huge chunk of time, or a chunk of time every day. Yeah. And if I've done an event, I will write a note, and it's like I have a little card. It just says Simon Majumdar at the top. And I'll just say, hey, Taylor, it was fantastic to meet you at X. I really love the way we connected over this. Yeah. I know we're going to try and do this. Let's make sure we do it, or whatever it is. And again, for everyone who you connect with, whether it's a junior chef who helped me at an event in a kitchen, or to the person who booked me and is paying me, a decent amount of money to go to that. Right. And it's not, sometimes people go, oh, was that just like kind of sucking up to people? And I go, well, these people may never book me for another event because it may have just been a one-off thing they were doing. Right. But just responding, that actual physical act of gratitude is really powerful. And I get something from it, whether it's you think about it in a kind of sacramental way by writing something and physically doing something. Which
we do so rarely now. Everything's digital and text. And
so I have a nice pen that I've had for years. Yeah. And I have nicely printed cards. And I take, 3, 4, 5 minutes to write each one. Yeah. And sometimes it might be 20 of them for an event. My wife puts stamps on them. I go and, post them. I walk down to the post office, put them in the post box, and there's something about that that I find very useful. Even if some people look at it and go, "Well, it goes straight in the recycling." Yeah, that's fine. I hope they read it. Yeah. I hope they don't look at it and go, "That guy, we don't want him back here." But if they read it, I hope they go, "Well, he genuinely appreciated the help that we gave him." Right. It could be a driver of a car who I wrote one the other day for someone who I think was driving me to an event, and we just hit it off in this car, and we're chatting and we're doing this, and he gave me his card. So I just, it was a 2-minute thing to go, "Hey, whatever, Dave. It was great to meet you. I love talking about Frank Zappa." That we were talking about Frank Zappa. That's what it was. And I was like, "I love talking about Frank Zappa. I thought I knew everything, and you taught me a few things about Frank Zappa." Yeah. Well, that was great. I think just to be able to do that. So that's one of the things I say to do. That when people ask me about things that really help, I think that helps because it puts you in a place of gratitude, and also, yes, it does have that impact on other people who go, "Oh, okay, this guy is at least polite." Yeah. Well, it takes it beyond, it used to be like, you'd get a text from someone when texting was first a thing. You'd be like, "Oh, I got a text from so-and-so," but now everyone texts for business. Text is always flying around. So to sit down and write a letter to someone just has so much more significance. I love it. And when you get something in the post, it's like, ooh, it's a proper letter, not, not a bill. Publishers Clearinghouse or something. Yeah. But to have that, I think it's still really lovely. And I don't get many of them these days because we just don't. Right. So, but when I do, and it's a card, I go back to the fact that excuse me. How we do? Oh, we're good. Yeah, we're good. I go back to my father passing, but I got a lot of condolence cards. Yeah. Now, people who I would have expected, or at least people I would have expected to express condolence because I knew them well, but also from lots of other people that came to my contact address, my PO box that's on my website, or all of these, just writing and going, "Hey, we just heard." People I didn't even know. Wow. Just going, "We heard about this. Yeah. We love watching you on TV. My father died last year, or my mother died last year, and I know what that can mean. And I wanted to just say, thank you for what you do." And that was fantastic. And it really has, not that one ever gets over these things, but it has helped guide me through that. Yeah. So I think you learn these things as you go through business, that, or your career, or any of these things, just life lessons. Yeah. So the other thing that we've talked about, and I think is useful, is, we've talked about a lot of it, gratitude. We've talked about letting things kind of happen to you. There is a plan in here in that sense. But also mentorship. Yeah. And when you meet amazing people who are very good at the thing that you want to do, right, and you don't take notice of them because you're so wound up in your own kind of who you think you are, right, then kind of shame on you. And again, the first person I ever watched doing TV as opposed to on TV was Alton Brown. Oh, yeah. And I go, well, who could I have better? You're talking about a genuinely brilliant man. Yeah. And who's, again, talking to your kind of young self, who's become a friend. You're like, really? Like, wait a minute. No, I mean, that's like, I can't even believe that's happened. But, but the fact that I can stand there, or I did however many episodes of Cutthroat Kitchen we've done together, and I can just watch him. Yeah. And it's like Food TV University. Right. Now, I mean, people would pay him $1 gazillion to have half an hour of him to take a master class with Alton Brown on Food TV. So for me to have that opportunity, if I didn't take that opportunity... Well, and a lot of people would take the gig and say, "Oh, this is all about me and my appearance." And you're going, "Wait, what can I learn? What can I take away? How can I grow?" Constantly be learning. And again, I'm 55. I'm still learning. Yeah. I still learn every time I do TV. I did a show fairly recently with Alex Guarnacelli, who I know very well. He's one of the best. And one of the people whose food I adore the most. But again, I was watching her do a judge, and we haven't done many judging gigs together. Usually she's one side and I'm the other, as it were, and I've judged her. But I was listening to her judge, and I was listening to the way that she expressed technique and talked about balance and talked about things in a very different way from the way I do it. And I was going, that's really smart. Not just what she knows, because she's brilliant, but how she expresses it in a way that the person being judged can get it.
Yeah.
And I was going, that's something that I'm going to learn, or I'm going to, in my own way, I'm not going to copy what she said, but I'm going to add that into hopefully my repertoire of the way that I express food judgment. And I go, if I didn't do that,
right,
I'd be an idiot.
Yeah.
I'd be a complete idiot. So I think those things, that mentorship side of it, I think is really, really important too.
Yeah, and always being a learner. Our neighbor across the street is 78 years old. She's lived in the house for 52 years. And when we first met her, she invited us over and made us little cakes. And we walked through her house, and I noticed she has notes everywhere. And she has, every newspaper she's had highlighted and written things and circled things. And on her wall, she has a big note that she hand wrote that said, every day, everyone can teach me something.
Which is amazing.
And I went,
I love that.
That's such a great attitude, and it's what you're demonstrating, what you're talking about. To never get to a point where you go, well, I've locked this down, I've got this nailed, but to go, what can I learn today? How can I grow, and how can I develop?
Well, I think if you are curious in that way,
yeah,
you're always going to have more fun. Here we are, we're sitting in this fantastic studio here that's really well set up to do this podcast. And I've, recorded my podcast in this very room.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. Shout out to the network studios in Culver City.
They are terrific.
Absolutely incredible.
Really terrific. But again, you learn by being here. You learn by how it's set up. By doing podcasts is a brand new discipline.
Right.
For me, anyway, when I started.
Right.
And you start doing them, and you've done 100 and something episodes. I've done 20, so I'm very much a naif in this market. But as I start doing them, you learn certain things. I learn how far to be from the microphone.
Right.
I've been very fortunate that I do a monthly food show called The Fork Report that I appear on with an amazing presenter called Neil Saavedra on KFI. If people listen to it, it's very, very good. On Saturdays, 2 to 5. And I go on once a month, and we just chat. And watching this guy, Neil Saavedra, who is the consummate radio host, funny, charming in the way that gets out that you don't just feel he's speaking to you, he's speaking to however 500,000 people that listen to him across, because it's very well syndicated, and funny, and just and informative, and how they get over. And he then invited me one day when he had to go and do something else. He invited me to come and host the show.
Yeah.
And you suddenly realize it's a bloody hard thing to do. I mean, it's, podcasts are one thing, because we could stop. You do a live radio show for 3 hours.
Oh.
It was, if you ask me anything that I've done that made me petrified, I did that show for 3 hours, and I had fun, and he liked me doing it, and I did some other, and he keeps asking me back to appear as his guest. Never asked me to host since, which makes me think I wasn't quite as good as I liked. But anyway, I had a lot of fun doing it. And again, I learned from him.
Yeah.
You see him either responding with someone down the phone line, or you just see him answering questions, and the way he paces or doing something. And I go, I'm not saying I've learnt it so I know it, but it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that, whether you're a chef and you're cooking and you see a new ingredient and you go, what do I do with this? Those people in life who have that real intellectual curiosity are the ones that are going to have the longest life. And by that, I don't mean necessarily be around, physically, but their impact will be around long after they're gone, because they're curious and they're always looking to solve something, and always looking to invent something, or always looking to connect with someone.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in that too.
Well, it's fun when, you talk to people that you look up to, and very often the ones who you would feel like would just give you answers, they just ask more questions.
Yeah.
They're just always questioning. And, you told the story earlier about this moment of breakdown for you, where you read these 4 words that you didn't even remember writing. Go everywhere and eat everything. And since then, you've gone a lot of places. I would love to know, what are some takeaways you've learned just from your travels and just going around and exploring the world through different eyes?
Well, for me, travel is the most important part of my life. And I think if I had to give up everything else and just make a choice to do one thing in my life, it would be to travel around the world with my wife, Sybil.
Yeah.
There's a saying, it was something that came from, Mark Twain, who I think was one of the great kind of philosophers as well, a writer, but just the things he said. Mark Twain said that travel is fatal to prejudice. So when you travel around this world and you meet people, you discover that for all the differences in their color, their religion, their gender, their of the people you meet, that people are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
People still wonder about feeding their families, boys and girls still wonder if the other boys and girls like them.
Right.
Mothers are mothers wherever you go, and their fierce loyalty to their families is, unquenchable, whatever their circumstances, how rich they are, how poor they are, their kind of passions for their family. And you discover that actually the world, one has to be careful, of course, but the world isn't as frightening as often that our media likes to make it out to be. They don't want us. They want us to be frightened because frightening is news. So they don't even want us to walk down certain streets in our own cities.
Right.
But when you go around the world, and I was recently in the Middle East, I was in Qatar and Bahrain and Dubai and Oman, all these places, and you meet the people, and the hospitality was off the scale.
Yeah.
And in fact, they were so pleased to meet you as an American or a Brit, and a bit of both, obviously, because they want to show you who they are.
Yeah.
And ordinary people. And I'm not talking about, what I call the crazies at the top of all countries, but who seem to be operating, particularly now, in very kind of polarized ways that seem to forget that the rest of us have to live our lives.
Right.
But they want to show you who they are. So, some of the best meals I've had have been some of the simplest in places like Morocco or Senegal. And I have seen, some of the big sites. I've been to see the Taj Mahal, and I've been to see Angkor Wat, and we've been to see the Great Wall. I've seen the Great Wall of China or the Barrier Reef, all those things that I said when I first sat down. Yes, I've been to see those. But actually, in the end, the great sites are wonderful, and they show you the history of civilization going back thousands of years, and that's wonderful, as a history fan particularly. But those aren't the things that last with me. The thing that lasts with me is a meal eaten in Rufisque, which is a small town in Senegal, where someone I met took me out there to have a meal with his family, and they cooked a dish out of fish and rice called thebujen, and we ate it out in their courtyard on a big communal plate with his 80-something-year-old father, his mother, his sisters who'd cooked the meal, and him squatting. And while we ate, his mother was using the back of a spoon to push the best pieces of fish and rice to my side of this big communal plate. Those are the things that I remember. What I remember is being invited to the US when I was writing my first book, and being invited by a group of women from Santa Cruz, which is that, fairly crazy, Santa Cruz, who call themselves, the goddesses, and invited me to come and share Thanksgiving with them, with their kind of crazy extended family. There was like 60 people sharing food, stuff going around, all kinds, hippie songs being sung, all that kind of nonsense, not nonsense in the sense of bad, but just kind of craziness. And sitting there and feeling happier than I'd ever felt, because it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And the way that they all mixed together at the same time. And this is the other thing, particularly in the United States, we live in very polarized times.
Right.
And I'm very honest about what I am. I'm a very liberal person, come from a very liberal background.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can go down and spend time in Mississippi or Alabama or places that I know where a lot of people are going to have very different religious and political beliefs from me. And I share a meal with them.
Yeah.
And, I realize that we're pretty much the same. And once you can have those conversations, breaking bread.
You're the one who told me. You said you can't say pass the ribs and hate someone,
You can't say to someone, I hate everything you believe, but can I have the potatoes? You can't do it.
Right.
So breaking bread with people, and I'm very fortunate. I've been to every state in this country.
Yeah.
This is an extraordinary country full of extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. And yet, sometimes because of the news and because of politics and because of things that get in the way, we don't have those opportunities to find out, what we can learn as, here I say we as kind of Californian West Coasters can learn from people in the South who have different values and but things that might be equally valid, what they can learn from us.
Right.
Because we have different ways in, thinking about health and things that are worth a conversation rather than us all just hating each other.
Right,
but what I find is travel and going and particularly cooking for people like that, or what you do, doing magic. I know I've never seen a room come together as when you start performing magic. You're doing something really incredible and everyone's watching it and you've got their attention. Now, you could use that in a very negative way by promoting other messages, but what you do is you do it in an incredibly inclusive way. You're not, when you do card tricks, whatever tricks you're doing, and I've seen, and I hope tricks is the right word.
Oh, you can call it whatever you want.
I don't know whether that's going to offend anyone.
No, they're tricks.
But if you're doing your tricks, you're not doing them to go, hey, everyone, look at me, look how clever I am. You're bringing everybody in and getting people involved as, if the trick demands it, but you're bringing them in. And I think that kind of inclusivity, whatever it is, whether you're a musician, a cook, an actor, whatever it is the thing that we need to be securing now.
Yeah.
Let's get people to join us doing things rather than dislike us for doing things that we might not necessarily agree with. Let's try and find out why they believe that. Let's go and find out if someone's religion is different. Let's go and find out what they believe in a respectful way.
Right.
And that's kind of my role now. I was very... I think one of my proudest moments was Alton wrote the foreword for my last book, Fed, White and Blue, which is about me becoming an American citizen. And he described me in it in a far too kind foreword. But he described me as the Johnny Appleseed of food. And I really like that notion of going around and dropping a seed of something.
Yeah.
Of kind of, even if it's just trying to be a bit kind to someone who you meet and leaving that wherever it is. And even if you never see it, knowing or hoping that something might sprout out of that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more important to me now than anything. And yes, I love doing TV, and whenever they ask me to do it, I'll turn up and I'll do it as well as I can, and I'll spend time with wonderful people. But if that gives me the opportunity to do all the rest of it, that's the most important thing in my life.
And in a world where everybody wants a platform and then gets one and goes, wait, why did I want this?
Yeah.
Or doesn't get one and has no idea why they want it. It's been so encouraging to myself and also to my wife, to Katie, and even our girls, to not only, get to see your journey, but to hear the heart behind it. And very few people that are given a platform realize that that's not just given to them for themselves, but they can use that to impact and to help others. And you just exude that in everything you do. And I'm so grateful that you're so generous with, the opportunities you've been given.
Well, I've been very, very fortunate, and hopefully I continue to be fortunate because I enjoy doing it. But but when good things happen, try and do good things, and then I get to hang out with people like you, and go to the Magic Castle, and Sybil and I came, like I said, we came out of there and we were just like, wow, that was really fun. And again, at the end of it all as well, let's have some fun. Well, everything's so stressful, and,
right?
And particularly right now with and everyone goes through this with parents being ill and all kinds of things that have happened. We get very stressed out, and sometimes just coming and chatting like this, or cooking a meal, or drinking a bottle of wine with a friend, or going to the Magic Castle, are really kind of oases of kind of joy. And again, if we can find some joy in life, I think now is a really good time to be seeking it out.
Yes. Yes, if not now, when?
Yes, quite.
Simon, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to share your story. How can people follow along in the journey? How can they see what you're doing? What should they do?
Oh, that's very kind. If people want to find me on social media, you will find me on just about everything as at Simon Majumdar, Majumdar. There's not many of me around. I think I'm the only one. So you'll find me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. And the thing is, if people ask me questions, that's me doing it. I don't have I don't have people. I am my people. So if someone asks me a question, it's me who responds. And then the podcast, if people want to listen to it, which I love doing it.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Is called Eat My Globe, Things You Didn't Know About Food, which is a food history podcast where I take either a person, a dish, an ingredient, or a drink like gin, and I go through its history going right back. And so there's some fun ones on the history of Spam, on the history of gin, on the history of the last meals served on the Titanic was an interesting one.
You just did the beer.
We just did the history of beer.
I've been listening because you've inspired me. You and another friend have inspired me to walk, because I know walking's a big part of your everyday.
Every day. I've already done, what time is it now? I've already done 15,000 steps
Yeah,
today.
it's amazing. Yeah, so I've been doing 5 miles every morning when I wake up.
Good man.
I'll get up and do it. But I listen to your podcast.
Aw.
And if there's anything I can do while trying to lose weight, it's to hear someone talk about delicious food. It makes my heart so happy.
It's a great time to listen to podcasts when you're traveling,
Oh,
when you're
it's so
walking,
good.
or I do it every morning and I listen to some self-help or mindfulness or whatever you want to call it. I listen to a couple of politics ones, not so much because it drives me a little crazy. I listen to some food ones. I listen to some sport ones. I'm a bit of an obsessive about boxing, so I listen to boxing podcasts.
Really?
All little ones, and like a lot of people who listen to podcasts, I'm a bit of a sucker for true crime ones as well.
Yeah.
So I listen to a lot of those as well. My wife is like worried that I'm listening to far too. She said, as long as it's not a guidebook.
Right.
I said, that's fine.
Yeah. It's awful. I listen to true crime all the time. It's awful when you catch yourself going, well, that's where he went wrong.
Yeah. Really?
Oh, Simon, this has been wonderful. Friends, if you're listening to the show right now, go click on the show notes there. You'll get a link you can go right over and subscribe to the podcast. You can follow them on Instagram, social media. But I'm so grateful that you would take the time. It means the world to me.
Anytime at all.